Most organizations treat Microsoft 365 as a productivity tool. It is not. What organizations are actually operating is a distributed decision engine. That distinction matters because this system makes thousands of real-time authorization decisions across the Microsoft ecosystem, continuously and without context of intent. The traditional IT consulting model died the moment cloud infrastructure became commoditized. Not because cloud is simple. Cloud is not simple. It died because the scarcity that made consulting valuable no longer exists. The old model was built on three constraints: scarce expertise, scarce documentation, and scarce compute. The cloud destroyed all three. Organizations now have access to the exact same tools as consultants. They have access to the same documentation. They have infinite compute at their fingertips. What they do not have is the ability to govern what they've built. This creates a fundamental problem. Hourly consulting incentivizes you to sell more hours. It does not incentivize you to create lasting value or reduce client dependency. The margins compress because clients eventually figure out they can hire cheaper bodies to execute what you documented. You become a rate-based commodity. Your hourly rate erodes. You compete on availability, not depth. This is not a sustainable path. The market has already decided this outcome. The margin compression is real and accelerating. Organizations are consolidating from 5 different IT consulting shops down to 2, then 1, then internal capability. Each consolidation pulls revenue out of the consulting ecosystem. What replaces hourly billing are outcomes. Clients no longer pay for effort. They pay for results. They pay for architectural decisions that produce measurable business impact without requiring constant external support. The 5 models in this series represent the architectural arbitrage that replaces hourly billing entirely. They are not additive to traditional consulting. They are replacements for it. They function on completely different economics. They require deep specialization in one domain rather than shallow expertise across 10. They charge based on value delivered, not hours consumed. They create recurring revenue rather than perpetual project cycling. The shift is not gradual, it is decisive. Every one of these models exploits a specific gap in how organizations operate the Microsoft Cloud. The gap is not technical. It is not a skills deficit. It is architectural entropy. It is the inevitable decay of governance when intent is not enforced by design. Organizations deploy Microsoft 365. They get immediate productivity gains. Then they discover they cannot govern what they've created. The system behaves in ways they did not anticipate. That is where the opportunity lives. The architectural arbitrage concept. Microsoft releases hundreds of features annually across M365, Azure, and Copilot. Organizations struggle to keep pace with the governance implications of those features. Each new release introduces entropy. More configuration options mean more attack surfaces. More collaboration features mean more data sprawl. More automation capabilities mean more uncontrolled workflows running in the background. The gap between what Microsoft built and what organizations can actually operate is widening with every release cycle. This gap is where six-figure consulting lives, not in implementing features, not in point-and-click configuration. The money is in managing the system behavior that emerges when organizations deploy those features without governing them. You are not selling implementation. You are selling the elimination of ongoing operational chaos. Most organizations deploy M365 for collaboration and productivity. Few understand the orchestration layers underneath. Fewer still understand the security and automation infrastructure that governs access and data flow. The gap between capability and governance is not a temporary problem. It is structural. Every new feature widens it further. Organizations do not lack tools. They lack decision-making frameworks for operating those tools at scale without creating unacceptable risk. The old model looked like this: sell implementation hours, deliver a configured environment, establish a support retainer, and wait for the next project. Revenue is project-based. Growth requires constant hunting for new clients. Margins erode as competition increases. You compete on price because differentiation is invisible. The new model looks entirely different. You architect outcomes, you automate governance, you charge for deterministic results. The client does not pay you to build something. The client pays you to eliminate a specific operational problem and keep it eliminated without requiring constant manual effort or external oversight. This shift changes everything about how you structure your business. You stop trading hours for dollars. You start building intellectual property that scales without proportional increases in labor cost. You stop being a consultant. You become an architect who owns outcomes. Your compensation is tied to client results, not your availability. The distinction is not semantic, it is architectural. Consultants execute tasks. Architects make decisions about system behavior and governance that produce measurable results. One is replaceable, the other is defensible. One creates temporary value. The other creates lasting competitive advantage for the client and recurring revenue for you. The 5 models that follow each exploit a different architectural gap in how organizations operate the Microsoft Cloud. Each represents a complete replacement for traditional consulting in that domain. Why? Microsoft complexity creates six-figure niches. Microsoft releases hundreds of features annually across M365, Azure, and Copilot. This is not hyperbole. The documentation pipeline is relentless. Every quarter brings new capabilities, adjusted defaults, security updates, and governance implications. The surface area of the platform is expanding faster than any single organization can absorb. This creates a structural problem. Organizations struggle to keep pace with the governance implications of those features. They understand what the feature does. They do not understand what it means for their compliance obligations, their security posture, their data flow, or their operational procedures. Each new feature introduces entropy. More configuration options mean more ways to misconfigure the system. More automation capabilities mean more uncontrolled workflows running in the background. More collaboration features mean more data sprawl across the environment. The consequence is predictable. Governance erodes, policies drift away, configuration diverges from intent. Traditional IT shops built their operating model around generalism. They learn everything about everything. They position themselves as full-service providers. This strategy is failing. The market is fragmenting away from it. Generalist consultancies cannot specialize deeply enough to manage the entropy that emerges from Microsoft's release velocity. They build implementation methodology. They deliver projects. They collect support retainers. They do not manage the long-term governance decay that begins the moment the project ends. The market is consolidating in a specific direction. Specialized boutiques that focus on one problem domain command premium pricing. An identity-focused boutique that eliminates legacy authentication and architects zero-trust policies does not compete on hourly rate. They compete on outcomes. They charge based on the value of the attack surface they eliminate. An AI orchestration specialist that automates case management and procurement triage charges based on the operational headcount they replace. They do not bill hours. A governance boutique that manages SharePoint lifecycle sensitivity labels and data loss prevention retains clients for years because they solve a permanent operational problem. Clients increasingly prefer deep expertise in one area over shallow expertise in 10. They do not want a generalist who knows a little about identity and a little about governance and a little about automation. They want a specialist who has solved the specific problem 50 times before and knows every anti-pattern, every edge case, and every compliance implication. That specialist commands premium rates because they reduce risk, compress timelines, and produce predictable outcomes. The consulting market is not consolidating around larger firms. It is fragmenting into vertical specialists. Organizations are moving away from 5-person IT consulting shops toward boutique practices that own one domain completely. A 3-person identity boutique can generate more revenue than a 20-person generalist firm because their pricing is based on value, not effort. Their delivery is efficient because they have solved the problem repeatedly. Their margins are dramatically higher because they are not resourcing against hourly billing. This fragmentation is creating 5 distinct business models. Each one targets a specific architectural gap. Each one commands premium pricing because the alternative is ongoing operational chaos. The opportunity does not exist in becoming better at what generalist consultants do. The opportunity exists in abandoning that model entirely and building something completely different. That is what happens next. Model 1. Agentic Workflow Factory, Part 1, The Foundation. AI agents are no longer experimental. They have moved from chatbot pilots to production business infrastructure. This is not a prediction. It is already happening inside organizations that understand what agents actually do. Multi-agent orchestration is the biggest shift in enterprise automation since cloud migration itself. This is not about deploying a single bot to answer common questions. This is about coordinating multiple specialized agents that work together to make real-time decisions, execute workflows, and manage processes that previously required human intervention at scale. Organizations are already deploying agents for case management, procurement triage, compliance routing, and knowledge synthesis. A financial services firm uses an agent to classify incoming customer requests and route them to the appropriate specialist. A healthcare organization uses agents to triage compliance violations and flag regulatory risk. A manufacturing company uses agents to manage supply chain exceptions and trigger escalations. These are not prototype projects. These are production systems handling real business volume. The value is not distributed evenly across the organization. It concentrates in one place, the orchestration layer that coordinates how these agents work together. This distinction is critical because it changes what you are actually selling. Traditional Power Automate consultants build linear flows. Step 1 executes, Step 2 executes, Step 3 executes. You define the sequence upfront. The system follows the path you created. That model works for straightforward processes with few decision points. It fails immediately when you introduce multiple agents with different capabilities, different data sources, and different decision criteria. The complexity compounds. The number of possible paths explodes. A single linear flow cannot handle it. Agentic architects design autonomous systems. They do not predetermine the entire sequence. They define the decision criteria, the agent responsibilities, and the handoff rules. The system then determines the execution path in real time based on the actual input. One agent analyzes the incoming request. Another agent determines which specialized agents should handle it. A third agent executes the decision. A fourth agent validates the result. If the validation fails, the system reroutes to a different agent. This is not a workflow. This is orchestration. The difference is not semantic. It is architectural. Orchestration adapts. Workflows do not. 5 core orchestration patterns exist, and each solves a different coordination problem. Sequential orchestration moves work from one agent to the next in a defined order. This works when you have clear dependencies and predictable handoffs. Concurrent orchestration runs multiple agents simultaneously on the same input. This works when you need multiple perspectives before making a decision. Handoff orchestration allows agents to transfer control to each other dynamically based on what they discover during processing. Group chat orchestration enables agents to discuss problems and reach consensus through conversation. Magentic orchestration uses a manager agent that builds and adapts a task ledger, assigning and reordering work as conditions change. Each pattern produces different system behavior. Understanding which pattern solves which problem is the foundation of agentic architecture. The business model shift is decisive. You stop building flows. You start managing digital labor. The flow is an implementation detail. The real value is in the agent design, the orchestration rules, the governance guardrails, and the continuous optimization that keeps the system aligned with business intent. This cannot be commoditized. You cannot document it once and walk away. The system generates data about its decisions, its failures, its edge cases. That data drives optimization. You become responsible for monitoring agent behavior, refining decision criteria, and introducing new agents as business requirements evolve. The client pays you to manage that system indefinitely. The pricing structure reflects this reality. You charge a build fee for designing the orchestration architecture and standing up the initial agents. You charge a usage fee based on how many agent interactions actually occur. You charge a monthly retainer for optimization, monitoring, and introducing new agents. The client gets immediate operational efficiency from automation, and you get recurring revenue from ongoing system management. This is not a project, it is a permanent operational responsibility. That is where six figures emerges. Understanding the orchestration patterns is essential to pricing the service correctly. Different patterns have different complexity, different use cases require different agent capabilities. Your ability to architect the right pattern for the right problem and price accordingly is what separates a six-figure practice from a commoditized consulting shop. Model 1. Agentic Workflow Factory. Part 2. The Service Architecture. The Agentic Workflow Factory has a simple structure. 3 revenue streams, 3 phases. Each phase produces value independently, and together they create a complete business model that generates 6 figures annually per client. This is not a guess. It is repeatable. The architecture scales. Phase 1 is build. This is where you design the orchestration architecture. You identify the specific operational process you are automating. You define which agents need to exist. You determine the responsibilities of each agent. You establish the governance guardrails that prevent agents from making decisions outside their authority. You define escalation rules. You build the initial semantic models that agents use to interpret incoming data. You stand up the monitoring infrastructure that tracks agent decisions. This phase takes 4 to 8 weeks depending on complexity. You charge a flat fee. The range is $50,000 to $150,000. This is not hourly. This is a fixed engagement price. That matters because it means you have incentive to work efficiently and move the client to productivity faster. Phase 2 is usage. The system is now live. Agents are making real-time decisions and executing workflows. Every agent interaction generates a transaction. You charge per interaction. The pricing might be $2 to $5 per agent decision, depending on complexity. If the client has a procurement agent processing 500 vendor requests per month, that is $1,000 to $2,500 monthly in usage fees. If they add a compliance routing agent handling 200 escalations per month, that is another $400 to $1,000. Usage fees scale automatically as the client gets more value from the system. They process more volume. Your revenue increases without you doing additional work. This is passive scaling. Phase 3 is optimization. This is the monthly retainer, $10,000 to $30,000 monthly depending on the scope. What you are actually selling is continuous system management. You monitor agent decision quality. You identify patterns in agent failures or escalations. You refine the decision criteria based on what you learn. You introduce new agents as business requirements emerge. You adjust governance rules as risk conditions change. You investigate edge cases where agents are making suboptimal decisions and recalibrate their training data. You track how many full-time employees the agents are replacing and justify the client's ongoing investment based on that headcount reduction. The service stack is concrete. Case management automation, where agents triage incoming cases and route them to the appropriate specialist. Procurement triage, where agents evaluate vendor requests against approval thresholds and compliance criteria. Compliance routing, where agents flag potential regulatory violations and escalate them to the right team. Knowledge synthesis, where agents pull information from multiple data sources and assemble answers to complex questions. Each service is its own business line. Each generates independent usage fees and optimization retainers. The client typically starts with one service. Within a year, they add two more. The business math is straightforward. You charge $50,000 to $150,000 for build. You generate $2,000 to $5,000 monthly in usage fees. You charge $10,000 to $30,000 monthly for optimization. First year revenue per client is $100,000 to $200,000. Year 2 and beyond, you eliminate the build fee. You are living on usage and retainer. That is $50,000 to $140,000 annually per client with minimal additional delivery cost. The margin is 70 to 80%. You are not managing headcount proportional to revenue. 3 people can manage 10 clients. 30 people can manage 200 clients. This is leverage. Clients experience this differently. They see immediate headcount savings. One agentic workflow replaces 2 to 3 full-time employees in specific operational processes. That payback often occurs within 6 months. From their perspective, they are not paying for consulting. They are paying for permanent operational efficiency. The agents do the work that humans previously did. The humans move to higher value activities. The organization benefits from cost reduction and improved throughput. You stop being a consultant who builds flows. You become an agent architect who owns client outcomes indefinitely. The distinction changes everything about your business model, your pricing power, and your competitive position. That transformation is the foundation of 6-figure consulting in the agentic era. Model 2. Entra First Security Boutique, Part 1. The ROI case. The second model exploits a different arbitrage entirely. This one operates on a forced market condition. Identity is now the only perimeter that matters. The network perimeter is dead. VPN is dead. The traditional security model built on firewalls and network segmentation does not function when users work anywhere. Devices are untrusted and applications live in the cloud. The only perimeter that still exists is identity, who you are, what you are authorized to do, when that authorization should be revoked. That is the entire security model now. Everything else is noise. Microsoft's own enterprise studies demonstrate this reality in financial terms. Identity modernization produces triple-digit return on investment. Not because security tools generate revenue. Organizations do not make money from deploying MFA. They make money from eliminating the operational chaos that identity problems create. One documented case demonstrates this with precision. An organization moved from legacy VPN infrastructure to Entra private access and zero-trust identity controls. The result was a verified 131% return on investment over 3 years. That is not a prediction. That is actual financial outcome measured by a major analyst firm. The investment cost $11 million. The benefit exceeded $14 million. The net present value was $8.2 million over the planning horizon. That ROI came from 3 places. First, operational efficiency. Password reset tickets declined by 90%. IT staff spent 80% less time managing user access. Help desk overhead dropped by millions annually. Second, infrastructure modernization. The organization eliminated 60% of VPN licensing costs. They retired physical VPN appliances. They eliminated Radius servers and certificate management overhead. Third, security risk reduction. Identity-related breach probability decreased by 85%. Credential stuffing attacks became operationally impossible. The organization quantified these improvements and calculated their business impact. That is where the dollars came from. This matters because it reframes what you are actually selling. You are not selling security. You are not selling compliance. You are not selling MFA deployment or security keys or phishing-resistant authentication. You are selling the elimination of identity attack surfaces and the operational savings that result from eliminating identity-based chaos. The financial case is not about risk. It is about velocity. Organizations cannot move fast when identity is broken. Employees cannot onboard quickly. System access is delayed. Credential management consumes IT effort. Every identity problem creates organizational drag. You are selling the removal of that drag. This creates a second advantage that is purely structural. Organizations running legacy authentication protocols face a hard deadline. Microsoft is retiring basic authentication, IDCRL, and POP3 IMAP without modern authentication. The deadline is December 31st, 2026. This is not a suggestion. It is not a best practice recommendation. It is a forced organizational event. After that date, applications and integrations using legacy authentication will simply stop working. Exchange Online will stop accepting basic auth connections. SharePoint will reject legacy tokens. Custom applications will lose connectivity. This is a hard stop with no fallback. This creates what the market calls a forced consulting event. Every organization running legacy authentication must modernize. They have no choice. The market is not competitive, it is compulsory. Every single organization with legacy dependencies will need external help to navigate this transition. They will need identity architects to discover what is still using legacy auth. They will need specialists to migrate applications to modern authentication. They will need infrastructure architects to design the identity-centric security model that replaces the legacy system. This creates guaranteed demand. You do not have to convince anyone that they need you. The deadline does it for you. The Entra First Boutique does not sell MFA deployment. That is commodity work. They sell identity attack surface elimination. They position as architects who modernize how organizations think about security entirely. The legacy authentication deadline is the hook. The ROI case is the justification. The ongoing architectural work is the revenue engine. You move the client from reactive firefighting to proactive governance. That transition is worth everything. Model 2. Entra First Security Boutique. Part 2. The service stack. The service stack of an Entra First Security Boutique consists of 4 consecutive phases. Each phase has distinct objectives. Each phase produces measurable artifacts. Each phase creates a natural expansion point for ongoing engagement. You do not sell a singular security project. You sell a progression from chaos to governance that spans months and generates recurring revenue. Phase 1 is audit. This is where you discover what is actually still using legacy authentication across the entire organization. Organizations never know the true scope until you look. The business assumes they modernized. They have not. You find forgotten SMTP relays on aging servers. You discover custom applications that developers built 5 years ago and nobody has touched since. You identify third-party integrations with vendor appliances that do not support modern authentication. You locate mobile devices running outdated versions of iOS. You find service accounts built into PowerShell scripts that authenticate using basic auth. Every organization has 50 to 200 legacy authentication pathways still operational. The audit exposes all of them. You charge $30,000 to $50,000 for a complete discovery engagement. You deliver a prioritized remediation roadmap that categorizes every legacy dependency by business impact and technical complexity. Phase 2 is remediate. This is where you actually fix the problems you discovered. You work with development teams to migrate applications to Auth 2.0. You coordinate with vendors to update integrations. You deploy modern authentication libraries. You replace legacy protocols with supported alternatives. You update mobile devices to operating system versions that support modern authentication methods. This phase typically takes 6 to 12 weeks depending on the scope of legacy dependencies. You charge $75,000 to $125,000 for the complete remediation engagement. The cost is fixed. You have incentive to move efficiently and deliver modernized infrastructure quickly. By the end of this phase, legacy authentication is no longer operational anywhere in the organization. Phase 3 is enforce. You now deploy the security policies that actually prevent legacy authentication from ever being used again. You build conditional access policies that block Exchange ActiveSync clients and legacy protocols. You implement phishing-resistant MFA requirements for high-value applications. You establish break-glass procedures that allow emergency access without compromising security. You deploy device compliance requirements. You create risk-based access controls that evaluate sign-in context and revoke access when threat conditions emerge. You integrate Microsoft Entra ID protection with detection logic that automatically responds to suspicious activity. This phase takes 3 to 5 weeks. You charge $30,000 to $50,000. When this phase completes, the organization has shifted from legacy security posture to zero trust architecture. That is not incremental improvement. That is a complete security model transformation. Phase 4 is optimize. This is the monthly retainer. $5,000 to $15,000 depending on organizational size and complexity. What you are actually providing is continuous identity governance. You monitor for new legacy authentication attempts and investigate why they are happening. You review conditional access policies monthly and refine them based on actual sign-in patterns. You evaluate new applications for identity requirements before they are deployed. You integrate new risk detection capabilities as Microsoft releases them. You manage break-glass account access and ensure it remains unused. You coordinate with Microsoft Sentinel to correlate identity signals with other security data. You automate risk remediation so threats are addressed without human intervention. The role shift is decisive. You stop being a security tool administrator who deploys MFA and configures conditional access rules. You become an identity architect who owns how the client's entire identity ecosystem functions. The consultant designs policies. The architect owns outcomes. Clients see measurable results. Breach probability declines by 85% for credential-based attacks. Onboarding accelerates because identity provisioning no longer requires manual steps. Compliance becomes operationally simple because every access decision is logged and auditable. The organization stops treating identity as a checkbox and starts treating it as the actual security perimeter. Pricing the complete engagement generates $400,000 to $350,000 in year 1. Year 2 and beyond produces $60,000 to $180,000 annually in retainer revenue alone. That is six-figure practice economics with 3 to 4 clients maximum. You do not need to scale headcount proportionally. You design once, you manage ongoing. The leverage is exponential. Model 3. Governance as a Service. Part 1. The problem statement. The first two models exploit specific architectural gaps. One manages multi-agent orchestration. One modernizes identity infrastructure. The third model exploits something far more pervasive and far more destructive. It exploits organizational entropy. Organizations deploy Microsoft 365 for collaboration and productivity. They get immediate impact. Teams can communicate across geographies. Documents are shared instantaneously. Projects move faster. Then the decay begins. It is not obvious at first. It is inevitable. Teams sprawl across business units with inconsistent naming conventions and access controls. One team creates their team's workspace called Project Alpha Internal. Another team creates Project Alpha. A third team creates PA Working Space. 6 months later, an organization has 400 Teams workspaces, and nobody can identify which ones are actually active. Dozens of workspaces are abandoned. Data sits in them indefinitely. Access permissions are unclear. Some workspaces grant access to the entire organization. Others are locked down to specific people. Nobody enforces consistency. There is no governance policy that standardizes how workspaces are named or who can create them. SharePoint becomes a data swamp. Documents accumulate in site collections with no clear ownership. Content is duplicated across multiple sites. Versions proliferate. Nobody knows which version is authoritative. Folders are named inconsistently. Search does not work because metadata is incomplete. Compliance violations emerge because sensitive documents are stored in public sites without protection. The organization cannot answer basic questions. Where is the current version of the sales contract? Which documents contain customer personal data? What is the retention requirement for this content? The infrastructure is there. The governance is not. Data loss prevention policies are written once and then become static rules that degrade over time. A policy is created to prevent credit card numbers from being exported. It works for 3 months. Then business requirements change. A specific department needs to export customer data for legitimate business purposes. Instead of refining the policy, the organization creates an exception. Then another exception, then another. The policy becomes a series of exceptions layered on top of the original rule. It is no longer preventing data loss. It is enabling it through accumulated carve-outs. Retention schedules are set during initial deployment and never reviewed again. A 3-year retention requirement is configured for financial documents. Then regulations change. The retention requirement becomes 5 years. The organization does not update the retention policy. The old schedule continues executing. Compliant documents are deleted before the new retention period expires. The organization creates a compliance violation because the governance framework was not maintained. Sensitivity labels exist but are not applied consistently across the organization. Some teams label everything. Some teams label nothing. Users do not understand when labeling is required or what each label means. The labels exist as a feature but not as an operational standard. Documents that should be classified as confidential are marked public. Data that is not sensitive gets labeled confidential. The classification system provides no actual governance value. Access reviews are manual, quarterly, and incomplete. Every 90 days, a compliance team sends out a spreadsheet asking team leads to verify that the right people have access to the right resources. Most team leads do not complete the review. The organization extends the deadline. Some teams eventually respond. The reviews are not thorough because team leads do not have visibility into who actually accessed what data. Access decisions become stale. People retain access to resources they no longer need. Contractors retain access after their engagement ends. Former employees retain access long after they leave the organization. The result is regulatory risk, data leaks, and operational chaos. The organization cannot demonstrate that they are compliant with retention requirements. They cannot prove that access is appropriately controlled. They cannot locate sensitive data when a data subject requests their personal information. The compliance team spends all their time responding to audit findings instead of operating proactively. Traditional setup and support consulting does not address this problem because it is not a technical problem. The technology is there. Conditional access policies exist. Sensitivity labels exist. Retention rules exist. Access reviews are possible. What does not exist is a governance framework that operates those tools continuously and adapts to changing organizational requirements. The governance as a service model treats entropy management as a permanent business outcome rather than a one-time implementation project. Model 3. Governance as a service. Part 2. The architecture. The service delivery for governance as a service is structured as a continuous operational loop. You're not building a one-time configuration. You're architecting a system that manages entropy. The engagement follows 4 distinct phases that move the client from chaos to a governed, automated state. Phase 1 is discovery and audit. You aren't just looking at settings, you are mapping the organizational sprawl. You identify every abandoned team, every shadow SharePoint site, and every inconsistent naming convention. You analyze the current data loss prevention DLP hits to see where the actual risk lives. This phase typically takes 3 to 5 weeks and carries a flat fee of $20,000 to $40,000. You deliver a state of the tenant report that quantifies the entropy, how many ownerless groups exist, how much sensitive data is overshared, and where compliance drift is most severe. Phase 2 is the governance build. This is where you implement the automation frameworks that replace manual oversight. You configure lifecycle management policies that automatically archive inactive workspaces. You establish naming conventions enforced by Entra ID. You build the sensitivity label taxonomy that actually matches the business's data types, not just the public confidential defaults. You set up the automated access review cycles for privileged groups and sensitive sites. This is a 6 to 10 week engagement priced between $50,000 and $90,000. Phase 3 is policy enforcement. You move from suggested governance to enforced guardrails. You deploy the DLP policies that block sensitive data exfiltration. You implement the conditional access rules that require managed devices for sensitive SharePoint sites. You activate the security trimming for AI agents to ensure they don't return data the user shouldn't see. This phase takes 3 to 4 weeks and is priced at $25,000 to $40,000. By the end of this phase, the tenant is no longer decaying. It is self-governing. Phase 4 is the optimization retainer, the core of the model. This is a monthly fee of $8,000 to $25,000. What are you doing for that money? You are managing the governance roadmap. Microsoft releases hundreds of features a year. You evaluate each one's governance impact before it hits the tenant. You review the access review completion rates and investigate why certain managers aren't participating. You refine DLP rules based on false positives. You adjust retention schedules as regulations change. You are the governance architect who ensures the system stays aligned with business intent as the organization evolves. The business math is compelling. Year 1 revenue per client ranges from $180,000 to $300,000. Year 2 and beyond is pure recurring revenue of $100,000 to $300,000 annually. Because the system is automated, one governance architect can manage 8 to 10 clients simultaneously. You aren't billing for the time it takes to delete a team. You are billing for the architectural assurance that no team is ever left to rot. Clients stop seeing governance as a project and start seeing it as operational insurance. They pay you to ensure they never fail an audit, never lose control of their data, and never have to deal with the chaos of a 3,000-team sprawl again. You have turned their biggest operational headache into your most stable recurring revenue stream. Model 4. Decision Engine Architect. Part 1. The shift from reporting to intelligence. The fourth model abandons reporting entirely. This distinction is fundamental. Most organizations measure business intelligence by how good their dashboards are. How many reports do you have? How fast do they refresh? How many users have access? This is backwards. The dashboard is not the product. The dashboard is a display mechanism. The actual product is the decision that gets made based on the data. If a dashboard shows you that inventory is low, but nobody takes action to replenish stock, the dashboard has zero value. If a report reveals that customer churn has increased, but the organization does not respond by changing retention strategy, the report accomplished nothing. Traditional Power BI consulting focused on report development, dashboards, visualizations, scheduled refreshes. A consultant would spend months building semantic models, configuring refresh schedules, and tuning query performance. The client would deploy the reports. Everyone would celebrate. Then nothing changed. Business decisions remained unchanged because the organization had no framework for converting data into action. The reports sat there looking pretty while the business continued operating based on intuition and gut feel. The decision engine architect model shifts focus from reporting what happened to automating what happens next. You stop building dashboards for human consumption. You start building deterministic models that drive automated action. The data arrives, the model evaluates it, the system makes a decision. The decision triggers action. A human never sees the dashboard because the system already acted. This shift becomes possible because of architectural changes in how data flows through the Microsoft ecosystem. Traditional Power BI worked on a scheduled refresh cycle. Data gets extracted from source systems at a predetermined time. It gets loaded into the semantic model. The refresh completes. Reports display the refreshed data. Everything is delayed. The data in your report is historical by the time you see it. Hours old at minimum, days old is common. This delay means you cannot make real-time decisions. Fabric's direct lake mode eliminates the traditional import refresh cycle entirely. Data flows directly from the source into one lake storage. Event-driven data pipelines replace scheduled batch processing. The moment new data arrives, it is immediately available to the reporting layer. Real-time analytics become foundational rather than aspirational. This architectural shift enables a completely different business model. Real-time data means real-time decisions. A manufacturing plant uses event-driven data pipelines to ingest high-velocity sensor data from production equipment. The data flows into Fabric. A machine learning model runs continuously on that data. The model identifies patterns that predict equipment failure before it occurs. When the model detects failure probability exceeding threshold, it automatically triggers a maintenance work order. The equipment does not fail. Production does not stop. That is not reporting. That is prevention. That is decision automation. A retail organization blends web traffic, inventory, and sales data in real time. The moment a stockout condition emerges, an automated alert triggers. A store manager is notified. They can respond within hours instead of discovering the problem at end of quarter when the damage is already done. A pricing anomaly emerges. The system detects it. Pricing is automatically adjusted to correct the deviation. These are not passive reports. These are active decisions made by a system that continuously evaluates data and responds to changing conditions. The value is not distributed across dashboard users. It concentrates in the decision model. The consultant who understands how to build deterministic models that drive automated action commands premium pricing. They are not selling visualization capability. They are selling operational transformation. The decision engine architect does not compete on Power BI skills or report design. They compete on their ability to identify which business decisions can be automated and build models that automate them reliably. This creates a completely different engagement model and pricing structure than traditional reporting consultants. The architecture shift from reporting to decision automation is the foundation of six-figure consulting in the intelligence era. Model 4, Decision Engine Architect, Part 2, the Service Stack and Pricing. The Decision Engine Architect Service Stack consists of 4 consecutive phases. Unlike traditional reporting engagements where you build a dashboard and then leave, this model structures engagement around building deterministic decision systems that improve over time. Each phase has distinct objectives. Each phase creates a natural expansion point for ongoing work. You are not selling a singular project. You are selling the transformation of how the organization makes decisions at scale. Phase 1 is assessment. This is where you analyze the current data landscape and identify which business decisions can actually be automated. Most organizations have no framework for this analysis. You interview business stakeholders. You trace decision workflows from initiation to execution. You identify where decisions are made based on manual data assembly rather than systematic evaluation. You calculate the cost of delay, how much time passes between when data becomes available and when a decision is made. If that delay is days or weeks, you have found an automation opportunity. You quantify the cost of error. When a decision is made incorrectly, what is the business impact? If incorrect decisions cost significant money, you have found a high-value automation candidate. The assessment phase takes 4 to 6 weeks. You charge $30,000 to $50,000. You deliver a prioritized list of decisions ranked by automation value and technical feasibility. Phase 2 is architecture. You design the one-leg structure that will hold the data supporting your decision models. You define which data sources feed into the model. You establish data ingestion patterns. You create transformation logic that converts raw data into features the model can use. You establish governance boundaries, so data flows are audited and compliant. This phase takes 6 to 8 weeks. You charge $40,000 to $70,000. Phase 3 is modeling. You build the actual decision models using direct lake mode so the system can evaluate current data in real time. You implement row-level security so data access is automatically restricted based on user context. You create the decision logic. The model receives input, evaluates it against historical patterns, and produces a decision. You test exhaustively. You run backtests against historical data to verify accuracy. You establish confidence thresholds. If the model is not sufficiently confident, it escalates to a human rather than making an automated choice. This phase takes 8 to 12 weeks. You charge $50,000 to $120,000. Phase 4 is automation. You deploy data activator rules that monitor incoming data and trigger actions when conditions are met. You integrate with Power Automate so the decision system can execute workflow changes. You establish monitoring and alerting infrastructure to track whether the model is performing as expected. You create feedback loops that allow the model to improve continuously as new data arrives. This phase takes 4 to 6 weeks. You charge $30,000 to $50,000. The complete engagement runs approximately 6 months. Total build cost is $150,000 to $300,000. Year 2 and beyond, you charge a monthly retainer for optimization and model tuning. $5,000 to $20,000 monthly depending on complexity. You are continuously monitoring decision accuracy. You are identifying edge cases where the model is making suboptimal decisions. You are refining the model based on outcomes. You are introducing new decision models as business requirements evolve. Example pricing model for a mid-market organization is $150,000 build plus $12,000 monthly retainer. First year revenue is $294,000. Year 2 revenue is $144,000 annually pure retainer with minimal delivery costs. The margin is 70 to 80% because you are managing infrastructure, not resourcing against hours. Clients see measurable improvements immediately. Decision cycles compress from weeks to hours. Operational risk declines because decisions are made systematically rather than intuitively. A manufacturing plant reduces equipment downtime by 35%. A retail chain improves inventory turnover by 28%. The consultant becomes a decision architect rather than a report developer. This role is neither replaceable nor commoditized. You own outcomes indefinitely. Model 5, Industry Tenant in a Box. Part 1, the productization opportunity. The first 4 models exploit architectural gaps. They automate workflows, they modernize identity, they manage governance, they drive decisions. All of them are services. You design something for a client, you stand it up, you manage it ongoing. The client is locked in, but the work is still custom. You have not built a product. You have built intellectual property that you repeat for different clients with variations. The 5th model abandons services entirely. It replaces labor with productized intellectual property. You do not consult with clients. You license them a fully configured, fully governed M365 tenant that is already built. This is not a template. Templates are starting points. You still customize them. You still configure them. Tenant in a box is the opposite. The tenant is complete. Clients do not customize it. They adopt it as is because it is designed specifically for their industry, vertical, and their operational model. Most M365 consulting is labor-based. Custom configurations, one-off integrations, ongoing support. You customize conditional access rules for each client based on their security requirements. You design DLP policies specific to their data types. You build automation workflows unique to their business processes. You repeat this work for every client. The IP is embedded in your brain and your methodologies. When you leave, the IP walks out the door. When a new consultant joins your team, they have to relearn everything. Tenant in a Box inverts that model. You build once, you license many times. The product is a pre-configured M365 tenant designed for a specific industry vertical. A law firm tenant includes deal room automation where clients can collaborate securely, matter management where cases are tracked with automated workflows, client collaboration features that allow external parties to work on specific matters without exposing firm data, compliance controls that enforce privileged access, audit trail requirements, and document retention rules specific to legal practice. Sensitivity labels are configured for attorney-client privilege, work product, and client confidential data. DLP policies prevent privileged documents from leaving the tenant. Conditional access policies enforce MFA and device compliance. All of this is built once and then licensed to 50 law firms. A biotech tenant includes clinical trial data management, regulatory compliance controls that enforce FDA requirements, cross-functional collaboration where researchers, compliance teams, and regulatory affairs can work together without creating data silos. The data governance structure separates active trials from archived trials. Sensitivity labels identify regulatory submissions, patient data, and intellectual property. Retention rules enforce the specific timelines required for clinical trial documentation. Access controls restrict who can view patient-identifying information. The entire operational model is baked into the tenant before the first client ever uses it. The intellectual property is embedded in multiple places. The sensitivity label taxonomy. Instead of designing labels for each client, you have already designed the complete label hierarchy for the industry. DLP policies are configured for the specific data types in that vertical. Conditional access rules enforce the security baseline appropriate to that industry. Automation workflows encode the operational processes that are universal within that vertical. Governance frameworks define how data flows, who can access what, and what auditing is required. Templates are configured with industry standard structures. Everything is pre-built. Once the tenant is built, you license it to clients. A law firm subscribes to your law firm tenant. A biotech company subscribes to your biotech tenant. Each client gets their own instance. Their data stays separate from other clients. But the operational structure is identical across all clients. This creates massive efficiency. You do not customize for each client. You implement the product. You stand it up. You move to the next client. The business model of this approach is fundamentally different from traditional consulting. You do not invoice for hours. You charge a monthly licensing fee. Law firm tenants license for $5,000 to $15,000 monthly, depending on user count and feature depth. Biotech tenants license for $10,000 to $20,000 monthly. A consultant with 10 clients generates $50,000 to $200,000 monthly in recurring revenue. The first build takes 3 to 6 months and costs $200,000 to $500,000. After that, each new client generates pure licensing revenue with minimal implementation cost. The margins are 90% or higher because you are managing infrastructure, not resourcing against headcount. You have transformed from a consultant into a software vendor. You own a product. Clients renew licenses. They expand usage. They do not leave because switching costs are prohibitive. They would lose the entire operational model embedded in the tenant. Model 5, Industry Tenant in a Box. Part 2, the business model. The economics of tenant in a box are brutal in your favor once you understand them. Initial investment is substantial, $200,000 to $500,000 to build and certify a complete tenant for a specific vertical. This is not a guess. This is the cost to architect a production-grade infrastructure, embed industry-specific governance, build the operational workflows that make sense in that vertical, test exhaustively, and obtain compliance certifications if required. A healthcare tenant that handles patient data must demonstrate HIPAA compliance. A financial services tenant must prove SOC 2 Type 2 controls. A legal services tenant must document attorney-client privilege protection. The certification itself is expensive, but it is a one-time cost. Once you have it, every client benefits from it. Revenue model is straightforward. $5,000 to $15,000 monthly licensing fee per client tenant. The fee is not based on hours or effort, it is based on value delivered. A law firm that deploys your legal tenant immediately gets case management automation, privilege protection, and compliance controls that would take 6 months and $200,000 to build custom. They pay the value they receive. $5,000 to $15,000 monthly is a fraction of what they would spend to build equivalent infrastructure themselves. The math is defensible. With 10 clients, monthly recurring revenue is $50,000 to $150,000. You have not added headcount proportional to revenue. You have not customized each tenant. You have not created unique configurations. 10 clients is 3 to 4 months of implementation work. You implement, you hand off, you move to the next client. Your delivery team stays small. Your infrastructure team stays small. Your revenue scales while your costs remain relatively flat. With 30 clients, monthly recurring revenue reaches $150,000 to $450,000. At this scale, you are generating between $1.8 million and $5.4 million annually in recurring revenue. You are not billing hours. You are not managing projects. You are managing a software product with 30 active subscribers. Your delivery overhead is minimal. Your infrastructure overhead is minimal. Your profitability is staggering. The scaling does not require proportional labor increases because onboarding, customization, and support follow a fixed pattern. Every law firm tenant deployment follows the same implementation sequence. Every healthcare tenant onboarding involves the same training curriculum. Every financial services tenant deployment addresses the same security requirements. You have solved the problem once. Repetition is efficient. You add implementation staff slowly. You add infrastructure staff minimally. You add product management staff to coordinate feedback from clients and release product updates. Your operating leverage is exponential. The consultant becomes a vertical architect who owns the entire industry solution. You do not sell to one law firm. You sell to the legal services market. Your product strategy is driven by what legal firms actually need, not what individual firms request. A feature request comes in from one client. Before you implement it, you evaluate whether it benefits the entire vertical. If it does, you implement it in the product and all clients benefit. If it benefits only one firm, you decline and suggest they build it custom. You are operating a platform, not a consulting practice. Example verticals demonstrate the approach. A healthcare tenant includes HIPAA compliance controls baked in. Patient data protection is automatic. Clinical workflows are configured for how healthcare organizations actually operate. Regulatory reporting for CMS, state health departments, and accreditation bodies is templated. A financial services tenant includes SOC 2 controls, immutable audit trails, segregation of duties, and regulatory reporting for FINRA, SEC, or OCC depending on firm type. Every financial firm needs these. You do not customize them, you enforce them. The inflection point occurs at 15 to 20 clients. Before that threshold, you are still covering build costs and establishing product market fit. After that threshold, profitability accelerates dramatically. Revenue grows linearly with each new client. Costs grow minimally because your infrastructure does not materially change. Margins expand from 60% to 90%. At 30 clients, you are operating at venture capital scale economics without the risk of a software startup. You have validated product market fit. You have recurring revenue. You have negative churn because clients cannot leave without dismantling their operational model. These 5 models represent a fundamental shift in how consulting value is created and captured. Architectural arbitrage replaces hourly billing. Recurring revenue replaces project delivery. Productized intelligence replaces custom implementation. The pricing architecture across all 5 models. The pricing transformation across these 5 models reveals the architectural shift more clearly than anything else. Traditional consulting lives at the hourly level. $150 to $250 per hour. Project-based engagements, labor-intensive, low margins. Everyone operates at the same rate because everyone is trading hours for dollars. You cannot escape the fundamental constraint. More hours equals more revenue. Less hours equals less revenue. You cannot grow revenue without growing headcount proportionally. This is a broken model. The market is consolidating around something entirely different. The Agentic Workflow Factory operates on a completely different structure. $50,000 to $150,000 for initial build, $2,000 to $5,000 monthly in usage fees, $10,000 to $30,000 monthly in optimization retainers. Year 1 revenue per client averages $120,000 to $200,000. Year 2 and beyond, you eliminate the build fee entirely. You are living on $50,000 to $140,000 annually per client with 70 to 80% margin. 3 people manage 10 clients, 30 people manage 200 clients. You have decoupled revenue from headcount. This is leverage. The Entra First Security Boutique follows a similar progression: $30,000 to $50,000 for discovery, $75,000 to $125,000 for remediation, $30,000 to $50,000 for enforcement, $5,000 to $15,000 monthly for ongoing optimization. Year 1 generates $300,000 to $450,000. Year 2 generates $60,000 to $180,000 in pure retainer revenue. Again, 70 to 80% margin. 3 to 4 clients generate 6 figures. You do not scale with headcount. You scale with client base. The governance as a service model operates on pure retainer, $8,000 to $25,000 monthly, depending on complexity. No build fee, no usage tiers, no project phases, just recurring revenue. Clients see the value immediately. Compliance violations decline, audit cycles accelerate. They renew because stopping would create chaos. Margins are 80 to 90% because you are managing systems, not resourcing people. One person manages 10 clients, 10 people manage 100 clients. The economics do not require proportional growth. The decision engine architect model follows the traditional 4-phase progression: $150,000 to $300,000 for build, $5,000 to $20,000 monthly for optimization. First year revenue is substantial. Year 2 and beyond, you operate primarily on retainer, 70 to 80% margin. You own client outcomes indefinitely. The relationship does not end. It deepens. Clients add new decision models. You expand the footprint. Revenue grows without proportional effort increase. The industry tenant in a box model is where the economics become almost obscene. $200,000 to $500,000 initial investment per vertical, $5,000 to $15,000 monthly licensing per client. With 10 clients, $120,000 to $180,000 monthly. With 30 clients, $150,000 to $450,000 monthly. At scale, you are generating $1.8 to $5.4 million annually in recurring revenue from a 30-person organization. The margins exceed 90%. You have built software, not a consulting practice. Your revenue scales without scaling headcount. This is exponential growth. The fundamental pattern is identical across all 5 models. You eliminate hourly billing. You charge for outcomes. You structure pricing to include a build component and a recurring component. Year 1 revenue is substantial because you are bundling build with retainer. Year 2 and beyond, you operate on recurring revenue alone. The margin profile is radically different from traditional consulting. Instead of 20 to 40% margins on billable hours, you are operating at 70 to 90% margins on recurring revenue. This pricing architecture is not incidental. It is intentional. It reflects a complete shift in business model. You stop selling time. You start selling outcomes. You stop growing by hiring. You grow by expanding your client base. The economics change. The compensation structure changes. The leverage changes. A single consultant can generate multi-million-dollar revenue streams once you move from hourly to outcome-based pricing. That is the difference between a consulting practice and a 6-figure business. The pricing structure makes it possible. Packaging and positioning strategy. Traditional consulting positions itself around risk mitigation and compliance assurance. We deploy security tools, we check compliance boxes, we reduce risk exposure. This positioning is comfortable because it is defensive. You cannot be blamed if nothing bad happens. You can be blamed if something bad does happen. The positioning protects you. It does not sell. Nobody wakes up excited about reducing risk. Nobody approves budgets for compliance assurance. Risk reduction is a tax on the organization. Compliance is mandatory overhead. This positioning locks you into commoditized pricing and reactive sales cycles. Clients call when something breaks. They call when an audit finds a gap. They call when a deadline is approaching. You are always responding to organizational pain. You never drive organizational strategy. These 5 models abandon that positioning entirely. They position as outcome acceleration and operational transformation. You are not reducing risk. You are eliminating attack surfaces. You are not ensuring compliance. You are automating compliance, so it requires 0 manual effort. You are not deploying tools. You are building business engines that fundamentally change how the organization operates. This positioning is offensive. You are leading the conversation. You are defining what success looks like. You are quantifying the business impact before the engagement even begins. The packaging strategy reinforces this positioning. Do not sell projects, sell engagement commitments. Bundle the build phase with a 12-month optimization retainer as a single engagement package. The client does not think in terms of discovery cost plus remediation cost plus implementation cost. They think in terms of transformation cost. The entire engagement is one price, $50,000 to $150,000 for agentic build, plus $10,000 to $30,000 monthly for 12 months optimization. The bundle price is $250,000 to $500,000. That is what you sell. That is what they commit to. The breakdown becomes secondary. The commitment is primary. Positioning strategy requires leading with business outcome, not technical implementation. Never say you implement conditional access policies. That is technical noise. Instead, say you eliminate identity-based attack surfaces. Never say you build Power BI reports. Say you automate executive decision-making. Never say you manage teams' governance. Say you prevent collaboration chaos at scale. The outcome is what clients buy. The technology is how you deliver it. Clients do not care about conditional access. They care about whether their organization can prevent credential-based breaches. Clients do not care about Power BI datasets. They care about whether they can make better decisions faster. Clients do not care about teams' naming conventions. They care about whether sensitive data leaks from their organization. The marketing message needs to be direct and contrarian. Traditional IT consulting is a race to the bottom. Hourly rates compress, project scopes expand, complexity grows. You end up billing more hours for less money. Everyone is undercutting everyone else. The market becomes commoditized. The alternative is to architect outcomes. You stop competing on hourly rate. You compete on business impact. You price for the value you create, not the hours you bill. You guarantee results because your revenue is tied to results. This positioning immediately separates you from the hourly consulting commodity market. The sales process reflects this positioning. You do not start with scope definition. You start with discovery. What is the client trying to accomplish? What is preventing them from accomplishing it? What is the cost of not accomplishing it? You quantify the business impact, not the technical gap, the business impact. If the client cannot articulate a measurable business outcome, you do not engage. You are not interested in selling implementation. You are interested in selling transformation that produces measurable results. Once you have quantified business impact, you propose the model. Here is what transformation looks like. Here is how we deliver it. Here is what you will measure to know it worked. Here is how we price based on that outcome. Success metrics are critical. They define what done actually looks like. They justify the pricing. They hold both you and the client accountable. A client cannot argue about paying for agentic workflows if you have established upfront that success is measured by headcount reduction in specific operational processes. A client cannot negotiate pricing for Entra Modernization if you have quantified the expected improvement in incident response time and calculated the value of that improvement. This packaging and positioning strategy creates a completely different sales dynamic. You are not hunting for project work. You are identifying transformation opportunities where you can credibly improve measurable business outcomes. You are positioning as architects, not implementers. You are confident in your pricing because the pricing reflects value, not effort. That confidence changes everything about how clients perceive you and how much they will pay for your work. The sales motion and discovery process. Traditional IT consulting operates on a familiar pattern. A client has a problem, you ask what they need help with. They describe something vague, you scope it quickly, you write a proposal, you start the project. The engagement is transactional. The client is buying hours, you are selling hours. The relationship is adversarial because more hours means more cost for them. You want the project to expand. They want it to shrink. Everyone knows it. Nobody says it. This dynamic ensures that you attract price-sensitive buyers who view consulting as a cost center rather than a strategic investment. Outcome-based consulting reverses this entirely. You do not start by asking what they need. You start by asking what they are trying to accomplish and what is preventing them from accomplishing it. This is not a rhetorical question. This is deep discovery work. The discovery process takes 2 to 4 weeks. It is not cheap. You do not discount it. You charge for discovery because discovery is valuable. During discovery, you are diagnosing the actual organizational problem, not the stated problem. Stated problems are almost always wrong. Organizations do not understand their own constraints. They describe symptoms, not root causes. Discovery uncovers the real problem underneath the stated problem. The discovery process for agentic workflows focuses on operational labor. Which processes consume the most headcount? Where do decision cycles take the longest? Which workflows involve manual data assembly or repetitive human intervention? You are mapping the organization's operational topology. You identify where digital labor could replace human labor without creating risk. You quantify how many FTEs each process consumes. You calculate the cost of those FTEs plus benefits plus overhead. This is the economic foundation for your pricing. If a process consumes 3 FTEs and each FTE costs $100,000 all in, you are looking at $300,000 in annual labor cost. An agentic solution that reduces that to 1 FTE just returned $200,000 annually. You price accordingly. The discovery process for Entra First Security focuses on risk and incident history. How many security incidents in the past 3 years were identity related? What was the cost of investigation and remediation? What is the probability that your organization will experience a credential-based breach? Industry data suggests 70% of breaches involve compromised credentials. Calculate the cost of a breach in your specific industry. If you operate in financial services, a breach costs $10 million. If you operate in healthcare, it costs $7 million. If you operate in technology, it costs $3 million. Now calculate the cost of Entra Modernization, $300,000. The ROI is so obvious that pricing becomes straightforward. The discovery process for governance focuses on compliance violations and audit findings. How many compliance violations has your organization encountered in the past 2 years? How much did each violation cost in remediation, fines, or reputational damage? How much time does your compliance team spend responding to audits versus operating proactively? Governance as a service eliminates violations by automating compliance. The business case is quantifying how many violations you prevent and how much each prevention saves. The discovery process for Decision Engine focuses on decision latency and decision quality. How long does it take to make critical business decisions? Are you deciding weekly while the market moves hourly? What is the cost of delayed decisions? A retailer that decides weekly on inventory rebalancing loses sales when stockouts occur. A manufacturer that decides quarterly on maintenance loses millions in downtime. Quantify that cost. Now calculate how much value you create by compressing decision time from weekly to real time. That is your pricing foundation. The discovery process for Tenant in a Box focuses on operational configuration burden and compliance overhead. How much time does your team spend managing governance? How many compliance audits do you undergo annually? How much consultant time do you burn on each audit responding to findings? A pre-configured tenant eliminates that burden. The client does not spend time configuring. The configuration is already done. Audits become simpler because the tenant is already designed for compliance. Quantify the time and money you save. That is what you charge for licensing. The discovery process produces a business case, not a technical proposal. The business case quantifies the ROI, the timeline, and the success metrics. This is what the client commits to. This approach attracts better qualified leads because clients are committing to outcomes, not activities. Clients justify premium pricing because the pricing is tied to measurable value, not to hours consumed. You stop competing on rate, you compete on impact. The dynamics of the entire engagement shift. This is the sales motion that creates six-figure outcomes and anti-patterns and traps to avoid. Most consultants who attempt to build these models will fail because they make the same mistakes repeatedly. The mistakes are not technical. The mistakes are structural. They are rooted in how you think about pricing, hiring, and execution. Understanding the traps before you hit them saves years of wasted effort. The first trap is underpricing the build phase. The initial architecture work is worth $75,000 to $300,000 minimum. This is not negotiable. This is where you create the intellectual property that generates recurring revenue for years. When a prospect pushes back on price, consultants discount. They justify it as getting the client in the door. You are not getting a client. You are destroying your own economics. If you discount the build phase to win a deal, you have already lost money before you start the recurring revenue. Do not negotiate build pricing downward. Walk away from deals where the client will not pay for the actual value created. Better to have no clients than to have clients at unsustainable pricing. The second trap is overestimating utilization. Consultants assume they can bill 90% of their hours. It is not possible. Assume 60 to 70% billable utilization. Account for sales work, delivery overhead, internal training, proposal writing, and the general administrative burden of running a business. If you assume 90% utilization, you will underprice your services and overcommit your team. You will burn people out. You will miss delivery deadlines. You will produce poor quality work. Conservative utilization estimates force you to price correctly or you will not make money. The third trap is confusing recurring revenue with passive income. Governance as a service requires continuous monitoring and optimization. The work is not passive. You are checking dashboards. You are investigating anomalies. You are refining policies. You are responding when something breaks. The revenue is recurring, not the work. Do not treat retainer clients like you can ignore them. Neglected retainers become cancelled retainers. Clients renew when they see value. Value requires active management. The fourth trap is building a one-size-fits-all tenant-in-a-box solution. Each industry vertical requires custom intellectual property. Do not try to serve law firms and healthcare and financial services with the same tenant. It will not work. Healthcare has HIPAA, financial services has SOC 2, legal has attorney-client privilege requirements. The governance frameworks are fundamentally different. Build one vertical, master it, own it, then expand to another vertical. Building one generic tenant that attempts to address every industry will result in a solution that works adequately for none of them. The fifth trap is hiring too early. Consultants build one successful engagement and immediately hire staff to scale. You do not need to scale headcount. Build the first 3 models with 3 to 5 people. Deliver high-quality work. Establish recurring revenue. Only then hire deliberately. Premature hiring creates overhead that eats profits before you have proven the business model works. The sixth trap is neglecting customer success. You cannot coast once you sign a client. If clients do not achieve the promised outcomes, they will not renew. Invest heavily in implementation and support. Assign dedicated people to each client. Track metrics. Ensure the client achieves the results you promised. Customer success is not a cost center. It is a revenue protection mechanism. Happy clients renew. They expand. They refer others. Neglected clients cancel. The seventh trap is treating these models as add-ons to existing consulting. They require a different operational model, pricing structure, and go-to-market approach. You cannot run hourly consulting and outcome-based consulting simultaneously in the same organization. The incentives conflict, the pricing conflicts, the team structure conflicts. If you are going to pursue these models, you have to commit fully. Build a separate business unit if necessary, but do not dilute the model by mixing it with hourly consulting. The eighth trap is ignoring competitive response. As these models prove successful, larger consulting firms will enter the market. Accenture, Deloitte, and IBM will build their own versions. They will have more resources and more credibility. You cannot compete on resources or brand. You compete on specialization. Go deeper than anyone else in your chosen vertical. Become the recognized expert. Own your market completely. That is your defensible position. These 8 traps will destroy your business if you fall into them. Avoiding them is not complicated. It requires discipline and clear thinking about what you are actually building and why. Market dynamics, the next 5 years. By 2028, the traditional hourly IT consulting model will be largely displaced. This is not a prediction. This is an observation of momentum already underway. Organizations have discovered that outcome-based pricing aligns incentives. Consultants who are paid for hours have incentive to extend projects. Consultants who are paid for outcomes have incentive to solve problems efficiently. The difference is profound. Within 5 years, the market will have shifted decisively toward outcome-based models. Hourly billing will become a relic of the previous era, relegated to commoditized support work and junior-level implementation. Agentic workflows will move from experimental to mainstream. Organizations are not deploying multi-agent orchestration as a pilot project, they are deploying it as operational infrastructure. By 2027, most Fortune 500 companies will have multi-agent systems running critical business processes. The question will not be whether to implement agentic workflows. The question will be which processes can be automated with autonomous agents. This transition creates urgency for consultants who understand how to architect agentic systems. Early expertise commands premium pricing. Late entry means competing in a commoditized market where agentic workflow implementation is routine and margin-free. Entra First Security becomes table stakes by 2026. Legacy authentication is gone. Passwordless authentication is the baseline. Phishing-resistant MFA is mandatory for administrators and increasingly mandatory for all users. Organizations without modern identity architecture will face regulatory and operational risk that is unacceptable. This creates a forced consulting event. Every organization needs identity modernization. Every organization needs someone to do it. The window for premium pricing is narrow. Organizations that modernize early benefit from lower pricing and early access to innovation. Organizations that modernize late pay higher prices because the problem has become critical. Governance as a service evolves from nice to have to must have as regulatory complexity increases. Regulations are not becoming simpler, they are becoming more complex. Data residency requirements multiply, privacy regulations expand, compliance obligations proliferate. Organizations cannot manage this complexity manually. They need automated governance. They need systems that adapt continuously as regulations change. Organizations without continuous governance will experience compliance violations that damage credibility and generate fines. This transition from optional to mandatory creates recurring revenue opportunities for consultants who can position governance as operational infrastructure rather than a compliance checkbox. Decision engine architects will be in high demand as organizations realize data is only valuable if it drives action. The dashboarding era is ending. Organizations have stacks of reports that nobody acts on. Data insight without action is waste. The transition from reporting to decision automation is inevitable. Every organization will eventually need decision engines. The consultants who understand how to build them will be in short supply relative to demand. Premium pricing reflects scarcity. Tenant-in-the-box models will fragment across 20 to 30 industry verticals. The first movers in each vertical will establish market leadership. A consultant who owns the legal services vertical will have built a defensible moat. A consultant who owns healthcare will control that market. By 2028, the vertical landscape will have crystallized. First movers will own their niches. Late entrants will find the market saturated. The opportunity window for capturing a vertical is narrow. The financial returns for consultants who capture their vertical are substantial. Consulting consolidation will accelerate as large firms acquire boutique specialists to fill gaps in their service offerings. Accenture will buy agentic workflow expertise. Deloitte will acquire governance automation capability. IBM will purchase decision engine talent. The boutique specialists who remain independent will be those who have already established defensible market positions through deep specialization. Generalist consultants will be absorbed into larger firms where they become fungible resources. Specialist consultants will become acquisitions targets where they become rich. The future belongs to the specialists. Margins will compress for generalist consulting, while specialists command premium pricing. A generalist who attempts to serve everyone will compete against every other generalist. Pricing compression is inevitable. A specialist who owns a single model in a single vertical controls their market. Pricing is determined by value delivered, not by competitive pressure. The financial outcome is completely different. A generalist managing 10 clients across 5 different service offerings will struggle to break 6 figures. A specialist managing 10 clients in the same vertical will generate multiples of that. This market transition is not temporary, it is permanent. The consultant who adapts to this new model will thrive. The consultant who clings to hourly billing will disappear. Building the organization to execute these models. The organizational structure required to execute these 5 models is fundamentally different from traditional consulting. Traditional consulting is built around generalist consultants. You hire someone who knows Microsoft 365. They work on whatever projects come in. They implement security for one client. They manage Teams governance for another. They build reports for a third. The generalist can do anything. They do nothing particularly well. They are resources that you allocate to projects. You hire a project manager to coordinate them. You hire support staff to manage ongoing customer relationships. It is a simple structure. It is also a low-margin structure because everyone is undifferentiated. Outcome-based consulting requires a completely different organizational model. You do not hire generalists. You hire specialists who have deep expertise in a specific domain. Model 1 requires AI architects who understand multi-agent orchestration patterns, workflow engineers who can build agentic systems, and governance specialists who understand how agents operate within organizational constraints. Model 2 requires identity architects who understand zero trust principles, security engineers who can deploy conditional access at scale, and compliance specialists who understand regulatory implications. Model 3 requires governance architects who understand automated lifecycle management, and automation engineers who can configure governance policies. Model 4 requires data architects who understand fabric architecture, analytics engineers who can build decision models, and decision scientists who understand how to translate business problems into deterministic logic. Model 5 requires vertical architects who own complete industry solutions, implementation engineers who can stand up tenants rapidly, and product managers who coordinate customer feedback. Notice the pattern. Each model has specialists. Nobody is a generalist. The specialist for Model 1 does not build conditional access policies. The specialist for Model 2 does not design agentic workflows. The separation is intentional. Deep expertise in one domain is worth far more than shallow knowledge across multiple domains. You build the first 3 models with 3 to 5 senior people. You start with Model 1. Hire an AI architect. Hire a workflow engineer. Hire a customer success manager who understands agentic operations. Deliver 3 engagements. Then hire the Entra specialist. Then hire the governance specialist. You are building a practice methodically. You are not hiring fast and expecting people to figure things out. The organizational structure separates architects from engineers from operations. Architects design the solution. Engineers build it. Operations manages it ongoing. This separation is critical because architects are scarce and expensive. You do not want them configuring details. You want them identifying patterns and designing approaches. Engineers execute the architectural design. They implement. Operations manages the relationship and ensures clients achieve outcomes. A single architect can oversee 3 to 4 engineers. A single operations specialist can manage 10 to 15 clients. The leverage is built into the structure. Compensation changes dramatically in this model. Traditional consulting compensates based on billable utilization. How many hours did you bill? That is your value. Outcome-based consulting compensates based on outcomes delivered and recurring revenue retained. Did the client achieve the promised results? Are they renewing their contract? That is your value. Base compensation is lower because the upside is higher. A consultant who delivers strong outcomes and retains clients captures a percentage of the recurring revenue they generate. That percentage aligns incentives. You want clients to succeed. You want clients to stay. You want to grow revenue per client. Compensation structure enforces that alignment. Culture shifts from project velocity to outcome quality. Traditional consulting celebrates getting things done fast. More projects completed means more billable hours. Faster delivery means more project throughput. Outcome-based consulting celebrates sustainable outcomes. A client that achieves dramatic results and renews their contract is a win. A client that gets a solution deployed fast and cancels because the solution did not work is a loss. Culture change is not free. It requires intentional hiring of people who care about outcomes. It requires removing people who are optimized for project velocity. It requires management discipline to reinforce outcome focus continuously. The management structure is flatter than traditional consulting. You do not need multiple layers of project management. You do not need resource allocation complexity. You have specialized teams. Architects own their models. Engineers execute. Operations manages clients. A 15-person firm can have 2 or 3 managers. A 50-person firm can have 5 or 6. The span of control is wider because people are specialized. They do not need constant supervision. They need clear direction. They need authority to execute. You hire people you trust. You empower them. You hold them accountable for outcomes. This organizational model creates a fundamentally different business. You are building a specialized professional services firm, not a staffing agency. Staffing agencies rent people. Specialized firms deliver outcomes. The economics, the talent, the culture, and the compensation are all different. Building this organization is not a cosmetic change. It is a fundamental restructuring of how you operate. Most consultants do not make this transition. They try to build these models while maintaining traditional organizational structures. It does not work. The structures conflict. You have to commit fully or not at all. The skills and mindset shift required. The organizational structure matters. The compensation model matters. The hiring strategy matters. But none of it works if you do not make the fundamental mindset shift. This is where most consultants fail. The shift from hourly consulting to outcome-based consulting is not just a business model change, it is a personal transformation. Many consultants cannot make it. They try, they fail, they return to hourly billing because the hourly mindset is comfortable. The traditional consulting mindset asks a simple question: how do I sell more hours? Everything else follows from that question. You want projects to expand. You want to add scope. You want to hire more consultants so you can bill more hours. You focus on billable utilization. How many hours did each consultant bill last month? How close are we to 90% utilization? You focus on project velocity. How fast can we deliver this project so we can move to the next one? You focus on resource allocation. Which projects should we staff? Where is the resource bottleneck? This mindset makes sense if you are an hourly consulting firm. The math is straightforward. More hours equals more revenue. Less hours equals less revenue. Every decision flows from that fundamental incentive. The outcome-based mindset asks a different question. How do I create more value? Everything else follows from that question. You want clients to achieve the promised results because your revenue depends on it. You want clients to renew their contracts because recurring revenue is your business model. You want to build systems that scale without scaling headcount, because leverage is how you generate six-figure outcomes. You focus on client results. Did this client achieve what we promised? Are they measurably better off than they were before we engaged? You focus on recurring revenue. How much revenue are we retaining from existing clients? How much are they expanding within their contracts? You focus on customer lifetime value. What is the total revenue we will earn from this relationship over 5 years? The mindset is fundamentally different. You are not optimizing for hours. You are optimizing for outcomes. The technical skills required are deep expertise in one domain. You need to know agentic orchestration so completely that you can identify patterns others miss. You need to understand identity architecture so thoroughly that you can design zero-trust systems for complex environments. You need to master governance automation so completely that you can architect systems that scale across thousands of users. Shallow knowledge across many domains is worthless. Deep knowledge in one domain is invaluable. You are competing against generalists who know a little about everything. Your advantage is that you know everything about one thing. The business skills required include the ability to quantify business impact. You need to translate operational problems into financial terms. You need to understand how your clients make money. You need to calculate what their problems cost them. You need to project what solving those problems is worth. The ability to negotiate outcome-based pricing is critical. You cannot negotiate hourly rates based on value. Hourly rates are commoditized. You negotiate engagement value based on business impact. You need to manage customer success relentlessly. Your revenue depends on it. The sales skills required are consultative. You ask questions, you listen, you diagnose actual problems rather than selling solutions. You develop business cases that justify investment. You communicate with executives, not just IT managers. You speak their language. You quantify their pain. You show them how your solution becomes their success story. The operational skills required include the ability to deliver consistently. You cannot miss deadlines. You cannot underdeliver on outcomes. Implementation discipline is not optional. It is foundational. You need the ability to optimize continuously. Retainer work requires constant refinement. You are monitoring systems. You are identifying inefficiencies. You are making improvements. You are showing clients that their money is generating ongoing value. The critical insight is that the shift from consultant to architect is harder than it sounds. Many people call themselves architects. Few actually operate as architects. Architects own outcomes. Consultants execute tasks. Architects are compensated based on impact. Consultants are compensated based on hours. The mindset shift is the barrier. Until you fundamentally change how you think about value and how you measure success, the business model will not work. You will revert to hourly billing because it is familiar. Making the mindset shift requires discipline and clarity about what you are actually building and why. That clarity separates the consultants who thrive from the consultants who disappear. Thus, implementation roadmap, the next 12 months. The theoretical understanding of these 5 models is worthless without a concrete plan to implement them. The gap between knowing what works and actually building it is where most consultants fail. They understand the concepts. They get excited about the potential. They do nothing because the execution path is unclear. This section removes that ambiguity. 12 months from now, you will have either validated your chosen model and built recurring revenue, or you will have failed decisively and learned exactly why. Failure is acceptable. Ambiguity is not. Months 1 and 2 are selection. You choose your primary model. Do not attempt to build all 5 simultaneously. You will fail at all 5. Choose the model that aligns with your existing expertise and the market opportunity in front of you. If you have deep identity knowledge, choose Entra First. If you have built automation workflows, choose Agentic. If you have governance experience, choose governance as a service. The first model should feel like an extension of what you already know, not a complete departure. You are not building completely new expertise. You are repositioning existing expertise into an outcome-based model. Simultaneously, build a business case for your chosen model. Quantify the market size. How many organizations in your addressable market need what you are building. If you are building an agentic workflow factory, identify how many organizations have operational processes that could be automated with agents. Calculate the serviceable addressable market, not the total market, but the market you can actually reach. If you are selling to mid-market technology companies, quantify that segment. Calculate your competitive advantage. Why will clients choose you over generalist consultants or larger firms? Quantify that differentiation. The business case forces you to think strategically about whether this model is actually viable for you. Months 3 and 4 are architecture and validation. You document the service delivery methodology. What are the phases? What deliverables does each phase produce? What does success look like? You document the discovery process. What questions do you ask? What data do you analyze? What business case do you build? You define the success metrics. How do you measure whether the client achieved results? You build the first engagement simultaneously. Treat it as a pilot project. You will learn how your methodology actually works when confronted with reality. You will discover gaps. You will refine. The first engagement is not a finished product. It is a prototype. Months 5 and 6 are measurement and refinement. You quantify the business impact from the first engagement. How much money did the client save? How much time did they recover? How much risk did they eliminate? You document this as a case study. You refine your pricing and packaging based on what you learned. Did you underprice? Adjust upward? Were there hidden costs? Build them into future pricing. Was the engagement timeline accurate? Adjust your estimates. The goal is that engagement 2 will be more efficient than engagement 1 because you have learned from the first. Months 7 and 8 are marketing and hiring. You launch a go-to-market campaign. Position your expertise in your chosen model. Build thought leadership content around the specific business outcomes you deliver. Start recruiting your first team member, a single implementation engineer or architect who can partner with you on delivery. This allows you to take on more engagements without burning yourself out. 2 people can manage double the client load. 3 people can triple it. Months 9 and 10 are scaling and evaluation. You take on 2 to 3 more engagements in your chosen model. You optimize the delivery process based on lessons learned. You should see clear efficiencies by engagement 3. The process should feel repeatable. Simultaneously, you evaluate whether to expand into a secondary model or go deeper in your first model. If you have proven product market fit in one model, going deep is usually the right choice. Deepen your expertise, dominate your market. Expansion to secondary models comes later. Months 11 and 12 are planning. You set revenue targets for year 2. You define hiring plans. You chart strategic priorities. By month 12, you should have signed 2 to 4 engagements, generated $200,000 to $400,000 in year 1 revenue, and built a small team. You have proven the model works. You have case studies that demonstrate business impact. You have documented methodology that is repeatable. You have recurring revenue starting. Year 2 is about scaling what year 1 validated. This roadmap is ambitious. It requires discipline. It requires focus, but it is achievable for any consultant with the mindset to execute it. 12 months of focused effort transforms your business. The competitive landscape and differentiation strategy. Large consulting firms are entering these markets. Accenture is building agentic workflow capabilities. Deloitte is assembling identity architecture teams. IBM is acquiring governance automation expertise. These are not coincidences. The firms have recognized that outcome-based consulting is where the margin is. They have the resources to compete. They have the brand. They have the sales force. They have the infrastructure. What they lack is focus and agility. They are trying to build multiple models simultaneously across multiple geographies for multiple industries. The organizational complexity is staggering. A decision that should take a week takes a month because it requires alignment across 6 departments. A solution that should launch in 3 months takes 9 because project dependencies slow everything down. Large firms move slowly. They compete on brand and resources. They do not compete on speed or specialization. Regional consulting firms are capturing mid-market opportunities. They have relationships with regional clients. They understand local dynamics. They can move faster than large firms. What they lack is deep technical expertise. They know M365 at a general level. They do not specialize deeply in any single model. They attempt to offer all 5 models to all clients. This is the beginning of their irrelevance. They compete against specialized boutiques who understand agentic orchestration completely or identity architecture completely. The regional firm knows these things at a surface level. The specialist knows them at a depth that results in better solutions and faster delivery. Clients pay for depth. Regional generalists increasingly find themselves squeezed. Individual consultants and small firms are winning because they can specialize deeply and move quickly. An AI architect working solo can deliver agentic solutions faster than a large firm because there are no dependencies, no committee approvals, no cross-functional alignment, just expertise and execution. A 3-person security team can architect identity solutions for 10 clients before a large firm's identity team finishes their first engagement. Small is fast. Small is nimble. Small is specialized. Small wins. The differentiation strategy is straightforward. Do not compete with large firms on brand or resources. You cannot win. Do not compete with regional firms on geographic reach or relationships. That is not your advantage. Your advantage is specialization. Own a specific model completely. Become the recognized expert in your market. Position as the Agentic Workflow Factory for financial services, not as a general M365 consultant who can do anything, not as a consulting firm offering multiple services. Position as the recognized expert who has architected more agentic workflows in financial services than anyone else. Position as the Entra First Security Boutique for healthcare. You specialize in healthcare identity architecture. You understand HIPAA implications. You understand healthcare IT culture. You own that vertical. This positioning creates a defensible competitive moat. A financial services firm looking to implement agentic workflows will research who has done this most successfully. Your name appears repeatedly. You have published case studies. You have spoken at industry conferences. You have demonstrated outcomes. The firm calls you because you are the expert. They do not call Accenture because Accenture does everything and specializes in nothing. This competitive advantage is sustainable. Large firms cannot replicate deep specialization because they are too broad. Regional firms cannot replicate it because they are not deep enough. Only specialists can own a vertical. The competitive advantages of boutiques are clear. Speed, specialization, customer intimacy, outcome focus. Large firms have different advantages: brand, resources, multi-model delivery, geographic reach. You are not competing against them in their strengths. You are competing in your strengths. The middle ground, regional generalist firms offering multiple models to multiple industries, is being squeezed from both directions. Large firms outmuscle them on resources. Specialists outmaneuver them on expertise. The regional generalist has no defensible position. Your strategy is to go deep in one model, own the market, and build defensible customer relationships. Build switching costs into your solutions. Make your clients dependent on your ongoing expertise. Deliver such strong outcomes that they cannot imagine leaving. That is how you build a defensible business that generates 6 figures and scales without proportional headcount growth. The philosophical shift from selling hours to architecting outcomes. The traditional consulting model was built on scarcity, scarce expertise, scarce documentation, scarce compute. In 1995, if you wanted to deploy enterprise systems, you needed consultants who understood those systems. That expertise existed only in their heads. The consultant was the gatekeeper. Organizations paid because they had no alternative. By 2010, the scarcity had shifted. Documentation was abundant. Online communities answered most questions, but expertise was still rare and expensive. By 2020, scarcity had evaporated entirely. Organizations have access to the same tools as consultants. They have access to the same documentation. They have access to the same cloud infrastructure. The technical gatekeeping is gone. What remains is the ability to architect outcomes from complexity. That is the only scarcity left, and it is rapidly becoming commoditized. The margin compression is real. It is accelerating. An hourly consulting business that charged $200 per hour in 2015 now charges $150. The work has not become simpler. The client budget has not expanded. But the competitive pressure has intensified. Every consultant undercuts every other consultant. The race to the bottom is inexorable. By 2028, hourly rates will compress further. The business becomes unsustainable. Your only alternative is to abandon hourly billing entirely. Move to outcome-based pricing or watch your margins disappear. The 5 models represent architectural arbitrage. They exploit the gap between what Microsoft built and what organizations can actually operate. Microsoft released hundreds of features annually. Organizations struggle to govern them. Microsoft integrated AI agents into the platform. Organizations do not know how to architect multi-agent systems safely. Microsoft unified data storage in one lake. Organizations cannot build decision engines from that data. The gap between capability and operational reality is widening, not closing. That gap is where the money is. The consultant who can bridge that gap owns the market. The philosophical shift is this: stop thinking of yourself as a consultant who sells hours. Start thinking of yourself as an architect who builds systems that generate value. The consultant is rented. You are replaced when the project ends. The architect is essential. You are retained because the system continues generating value. Your value is not measured in hours. It is measured in outcomes. Did the client reduce operational costs? Did they eliminate risk? Did they accelerate decision-making? Did they scale revenue? That is what you are selling. That is what they are buying. This shift changes everything about how you operate. Traditional consulting optimizes for billable hours, more projects, more staff, more utilization. That is the entire business model. Outcome-based consulting optimizes for recurring revenue, fewer clients, deeper relationships, longer engagement duration. That is the entire business model. The optimization functions are opposite. If you do not consciously shift your operational model, you will remain trapped in hourly thinking while attempting to execute outcome-based pricing. The misalignment will destroy you. The shift also changes how you relate to clients. Hourly consulting creates adversarial relationships. You want projects to expand. Clients want them to shrink. Everyone knows it. Nobody says it. Outcome-based consulting aligns incentives. You want clients to achieve results. Clients want the same. You want clients to stay for years. Clients want to stay because they are seeing value. The relationship is cooperative, not adversarial. Most importantly, the shift changes what you can earn. An hourly consultant managing $1 million in annual revenue with 30% margin generates $300,000 profit. An outcome-based consultant managing $1 million in recurring revenue with 75% margin generates $750,000 profit. The difference is massive. The consultant who makes this shift doubles their profit on the same revenue. That is not marginal improvement. That is a fundamental restructuring of economic reality. The traditional consulting model was built for scarcity. The cloud eliminated scarcity. The consultant who recognizes this and adapts thrives. The consultant who clings to hourly billing becomes irrelevant. This is not temporary. It is the permanent restructuring of the consulting economy. The choice is yours. Adapt or disappear. The path forward. Traditional IT consulting is a race to the bottom. Hourly billing is mathematically incompatible with the modern consulting market. The compression is relentless. Every year rates decline. Every year margins shrink. Organizations have learned that hourly consultants are optimized for extending projects, not solving problems. That incentive misalignment is now obvious. Clients are moving decisively away from hourly models. They are selecting outcome-based partners. If you remain in hourly billing, you are competing against every other consultant who also remains in hourly billing. The market will commoditize you. Pricing will compress to zero. Your business becomes unsustainable. This is not a temporary phenomenon. This is permanent restructuring of how consulting value is captured and compensated. The 5 models represent the architectural future of consulting: Agentic Workflow Factory, Entra First Security Boutique, Governance as a Service, Decision Engine Architect, Industry Tenant in a Box. Each requires deep specialization. Each requires outcome-based pricing. Each generates recurring revenue. Each scales without proportional headcount growth. Each produces 6-figure outcomes for the consultant who executes it. These are not theoretical concepts. They are operational models proven by organizations already operating them. The only question is whether you will be among the consultants capturing this market or among the consultants displaced by it. The market is fragmenting. Full-service providers offering everything to everyone are becoming irrelevant. Specialists owning single models in single verticals are capturing market share and commanding premium pricing. This fragmentation is permanent. Organizations increasingly prefer deep expertise in one domain over shallow knowledge across 10. The specialist wins, the generalist loses, the choice is binary. You either go deep in one model or you remain trapped in the generalist commodity market. There is no middle ground. The next 12 months are critical. Choose your model, build your first engagement, measure the results, refine based on what you learn. By month 12, you will have validated the model or discovered it does not work for you. Either outcome is valuable. The worst outcome is ambiguity and inaction. The consultant who commits to one model and executes for 12 months creates a foundation for 6-figure revenue. The consultant who delays and waits and analyzes forever creates nothing. The 6-figure consulting income is not a mystery. It is not luck. It is the direct result of moving from hourly billing to outcome-based pricing and building deep expertise in a single domain. Your technical skills are table stakes. Every consultant can learn conditional access. Every consultant can build Power Automate flows. Every consultant can configure Teams governance. What separates 6-figure consultants from hourly consultants is the ability to architect outcomes and create defensible intellectual property. That is what you should be building. The future belongs to consultants who specialize deeply, move quickly, and focus relentlessly on client results. The question is not whether you can do this. The question is whether you will do this. Subscribe to the M365 FM podcast for deeper dives into each model. Connect on LinkedIn. Let's build this together.